After our parents divorced, my younger sister chose to live with our wealthy father. I moved into my mother's rented apartment. Years later, our father squandered the entire family fortune through alcoholism, gambling, and reckless spending. Meanwhile, my mother started doing live streaming and became a renowned female entrepreneur. My younger sister's life took a sudden turn for the worse, so she came to me crying for comfort. But when I wasn't looking, she slipped something into my drink. We're both our parents' biological children. Why do you get to live so well while I end up homeless? It's my turn to have the good life. When I opened my eyes again, we'd gone back to the day our parents divorced. This time, she rushed to hug Mom first. I want to live with Mommy. No matter how hard life gets, I'm willing. But she didn't know that Mom was even scarier than Dad. My little sister had always been sweet-tongued and knew how to charm people, so she was more favored than me since childhood. So when our parents decided to divorce, they asked my sister first, asked who she wanted to live with. Dad was a rich kid who'd inherited the family trust fund. There was plenty of money at home. Mom was a full-time housewife, left with nothing after the divorce and could only struggle to make ends meet. So without a second thought, my little sister obediently hugged Dad. I love you the most, Dad. I can't live without you. I want to grow up with you. Dad was overjoyed, picking up my sister and lifting her high in the air. My little princess, then you can stay with Daddy and be a little princess forever. My sister smiled sweetly, casting a smug glance at me when our parents weren't looking. Yes, she's always been like this since childhood, always trying to compete with me. As long as she can defeat me, she's more than willing to do things that harm others without benefiting herself. Dad and little sister were both laughing joyfully, while Mom stood by looking sorrowful. I remained silent for a moment before going over to hold Mom's hand. Mom, I want to live with you. She gave me a deep look but said nothing. A few years later, by sheer chance, Mom's live streaming career took off spectacularly. We moved from a dilapidated apartment to a gated community. Then we moved from the community to a standalone villa in an affluent neighborhood. Mom's second-hand Toyota was replaced with a Mercedes, and then later a Porsche. Once, when Mom took me out in the car, we came across a traffic accident on the way. A man riding an electric scooter going the wrong way crashed into a luxury car. The luxury car owner shouted curses, while the scooter rider cowered timidly. His daughter was wailing loudly nearby, but he found her embarrassing and kicked her. The devastated girl turned her head away just as her eyes met mine through the car window. It was actually my sister, Zoe Miller, and that man humbly apologizing, that was my father. Zoe spotted Mom and me too. Her eyes lit up as she chased after us like crazy, but Mom had already stepped on the gas, driving off as if nothing had happened. I hesitated before speaking up. Mom, that was Zoe. Mom said indifferently, I saw her. So what? You want to help her? I didn't dare to utter a word. Mom let out a cold laugh. She was so adorable when she was little, but now she looks just as ugly as her father. Ungrateful wretch. This is what she deserves. I shut my mouth completely. Not long after, Zoe found my contact information. She asked me out to meet. In the coffee shop, she was weeping pitifully, her tears falling like pear blossoms in the rain. Sister, you have no idea, Dad. Zoe said Dad was a complete idiot. He's incompetent, yet insatiably greedy. A few years ago, he ignored Grandpa's warnings and invested in a company after listening to his friend's nonsense. But the company was actually a carefully laid trap, so tens of millions of dollars just went down the drain. Grandpa was utterly furious and kicked him out of the house. I thought Dad would correct his mistakes, but all he cares about is partying, women, and gambling. After being driven out, Dad indulged in revelry every night. Following his girlfriend's suggestions, he went to Las Vegas and splurged recklessly. Within a few months, he had completely drained millions of dollars in savings. Dad even racked up millions in gambling debts. Grandpa couldn't be bothered with him anymore and refused to give him a single cent. Left with no choice, Dad had to take up food delivery to earn money, but he was accustomed to a life of privilege. In the past, he'd always had a chauffeur when going out. He wasn't even familiar with traffic rules. Not long after starting deliveries, he drove the wrong way and crashed into a luxury car, which was exactly the scene I witnessed the other day. In the coffee shop, Zoe threw herself into my arms, weeping bitterly. Sister, I saw Mom driving a Porsche, wearing Chanel, and your bag is Dior too. You must be doing really well, huh? Mom, will you go back and tell her I'm her daughter too? I don't want to stay with Dad anymore. I want to live with her. She must miss me so much. In the first few years after we parted, she often called, hoping I'd come back. Her eyes were filled with anticipation, but the thought of my mother sent a shiver down my spine. Finally, I said, "You'd better not live with Mom, but I can give you some money." Zoe abruptly looked up, a flash of venom in her eyes. But soon, a grateful smile appeared on her face. "Thank you, sis. I knew you'd be the nicest to me." 3. The next day, I transferred $5,000 to Zoe. She offered to invite me to her place for dinner. Inside the rented apartment, Zoe handed me a cup of tea. "Big sister, I remember you always loved jasmine tea since childhood. I picked this tea especially for you. Try it and see how you like it." I drank it without suspicion. But soon, the world spun around me. The last image was Zoe slashing my face with a knife. "Chloe Miller, we're both our parents' biological children. Why do you get to live so well while I end up homeless? You're so rich, yet you only give me this little money and won't even let me return to Mom's side. You selfish, heartless bitch." Endless darkness ensued. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the day my parents divorced. Faced with her father's question, Zoe didn't hesitate this time. She turned and hugged her mother tightly. "Zoe can't live without Mommy. Zoe wants to stay with Mommy, no matter how hard life gets." Touched, her mother embraced Zoe. Nestled in those arms, Zoe flashed a sly smile. In everyone's blind spot where no eyes could see, Zoe silently mouthed words meant only for me. "Sister, this time, it's my turn to rise to fame and fortune." So, she had also been reborn, but she didn't realize that mother was even more terrifying than father. 4. Zoe cheerfully rushed off to the rented apartment. Meanwhile, I stayed behind in the villa. Father was as unreliable as ever. Freshly divorced, I was ready to hit the clubs at night. On the phone, some lover could in an overly sweet and sticky voice. Yet it made Dad incredibly happy as he grabbed his coat to head out. Just as he was about to leave, I stopped him. I asked, "Dad, who will have dinner with me?" He replied matter-of-factly, "Isn't there the nanny? Let her eat with you." I bit my lip and said, "I haven't seen Grandpa for a long time. I kind of miss him. Dad, could you take me to his house?" Dad hesitated for a while. Seeing this, I added, "Cousin from Aunt's family went to see Grandpa 2 days ago." Who knows what he said, but Grandpa bought Aunt another car. "Dad, did you know about this?" Hearing this, Dad immediately stopped hesitating. "That family just knows how to take advantage of us all day long. Disgusting. Chloe, I'll have the driver take you there right now. Remember to put in a good word for me in front of Grandpa, understand?" With that, he shoved me into the car. Grandpa lived in a secluded lakeside manor. In his eyes, my mother was a scheming woman, ruthlessly ambitious and cunning, stopping at nothing to climb up by latching onto my father. So he always looked down on Mom, and by extension, disliked both me and Zoe. In our past life, after our parents divorced, Zoe tried to win over Grandpa too. But at home, she had always been a spoiled little princess, empty-headed, with her only talent being putting on an act of obedience and innocence. Yet at Grandpa's house, all her little tricks were useless. No matter how much she cried and made a scene, all she got in return was her grandfather's indifference. Unlike her situation, Aunt's son, Ethan Carter, was the apple of Grandfather's eye. No matter what he said or did, he always received Grandfather's praise. As time went by, Zoe grew resentful. During a family gathering, she deliberately smashed the antique vase and framed it on Ethan. She thought this would cause Ethan's status to plummet. But what awaited her was a surveillance video from a hidden corner. Ethan's status remained unshaken. Zoe, however, was severely punished by her grandfather. Her grandfather accused her, "You're cunning and ruthless, willing to do anything for gain, just like your mother." And she made Daddy promise never to bring that woman home again. From that day on, Zoe held a deep grudge against her grandfather. On the old man's birthday, Zoe even posted a comic on social media. The comic was a vicious curse. It depicted the Grim Reaper using various methods to claim an old man's life. Grandpa certainly saw her, but he paid her no attention. Later, when her father went bankrupt, Zoe's living conditions plummeted. At this point, she finally remembered Grandpa and knelt at the manor gates, begging for his forgiveness and shelter. Grandpa didn't even show his face. The security guards dragged her away immediately. This time has reversed its course. Zoe has gone to pursue the new life she's always dreamed of. And the person standing outside the lakeside manor, about to visit Grandpa, is me. After taking several deep breaths, I pressed the doorbell of the villa. Even though Dad had already informed Grandpa in advance that I wanted to pay him a visit. But in the study, Grandpa still regarded me with a cold expression. Even after I politely greeted him, he showed no intention of acknowledging me. Unfazed, I found a corner to sit down. During those years living with Mom, I had endured far worse humiliations, countless times worse than this. This was nothing. In the study, Grandpa was quizzing Ethan on his schoolwork. Ethan is 17 this year, an academically outstanding prodigy with a keen interest in finance and economics. His grandfather is a self-made billionaire, though regrettably none of his own children have amounted to much. Thus, he genuinely admires this driven and down-to-earth grandson, frequently summoning Ethan to discuss famous domestic and international business transaction cases with him. Grandfather's questions were all quite challenging, Ethan managed to answer the first few correctly. But this one was different. Ethan sank into deep contemplation. Grandpa wasn't in a hurry, patiently waiting for his response. I timidly raised my hand. Grandpa, can I share my thoughts? Grandpa glanced at me with a skeptical expression. You didn't even finish junior high. What could you possibly say? If you can't sit still, then leave. No need to play these little tricks. I wasn't angry either and replied with a smile. If my answer doesn't satisfy you, I'll go out and stand in punishment, okay? Grandpa snorted, but Ethan chimed in. Grandpa, why not let her try? Grandpa stayed silent, which meant consent. I shot Ethan a grateful smile and immediately began to speak. This group of entrepreneurs had improper sources of startup capital. In their early years, they helped foreign companies break into the American market by acting as commercial brokers, exploiting information asymmetry to reap exorbitant profits. Grandfather gave me an unexpected glance and continued questioning. Then tell me, what are their natural advantages? And where do their problems lie? After some thought, I replied, they established close relationships with foreign companies early on and adapted to the market relatively quickly. That's their advantage. But every advantage has its drawback. Their problem lies in over-reliance on the first-mover advantage of foreign companies without developing their own core competitiveness. Thus, when the market began normalizing, their competitive edge disappeared. Grandfather stared at me intently for quite a while, his expression complex. There was doubt, scrutiny, yet no longer any disdain. After a moment, he asked, "You're only 14, where did you hear all this?" I replied, "There are many books at the city library. I love reading." Truth was different. Many of Mom's clients benefited precisely from such business brokers. They exploited loopholes, securing wealth through nepotism and information asymmetry, yet credited everything to their own skills and abilities. Then on some drunken afternoon, embracing a young girl in their arms, they couldn't wait to boast about their past successes. Thinking of these things, I squeezed my eyes shut tightly. When I opened them again, I was still in Grandfather's solemn, antiquated study. Not in that dim, ambiguous bedroom bathed in pink lights. Clap, 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 Ethan lightly began to applaud. He said, "Chloe is only 14, but her reading comprehension and critical thinking skills are remarkable. That deserves recognition." He turned to me with a warm and sincere expression. I feel humbled in comparison. I quickly shook my head. It was just a coincidence. All those finance and economic concepts you mentioned, I don't understand any of them. I still have so much to learn. After a brief silence, Ethan asked me, "Chloe, would you like to study with me?" 6. Under Ethan's suggestion, Grandpa allowed me to sit in, yet he remained suspicious of me. He suspected this was some unconventional scheme, that the real goal was still to swindle money from him, so he demanded Ethan report regularly about me. In truth, neither Ethan's supervision nor anyone's coercion was necessary. Every day followed the same monotonous routine of attending classes, and once the weekend arrived, it was either practicing piano or burying myself in the library. This is the life I longed for but could never attain. How could I not cherish it? Several months later, in Grandfather's study, I was no longer just the listener. Often, when Grandpa posed a question, Ethan and I would argue fiercely until our faces flushed red. Until Grandpa called a stop. I don't recall when it began. Grandpa no longer looked at me with wary eyes. Ethan also stopped reporting on me to Grandpa. He complained that paying attention to me had cost him valuable time, hence his defeat by me in a minor test. At this, Grandpa simply laughed. I pretended not to know any of it, quietly continuing with my practice problems. My hard work at school had paid off handsomely. During a math competition, I won first prize. The teacher said she would commend me by name at the parents' meeting. Just that, as usual, my dad couldn't be relied upon. He promised to attend the meeting, yet half an hour before it began, he told me he wouldn't make it. He said, "Chloe, Daddy has a very important meeting to attend. Let the babysitter go to your parent-teacher conference, okay? Be good." But what came through the phone was unmistakably the flirtatious laughter of a group of women. I didn't expose him, calmly hung up the phone, and then sent the math competition honor roll posted on the classroom blackboard to Grandpa. On the list, my name and Ethan's topped the junior high and high school divisions respectively, the two surnames Miller and Carter shining brightly under the sunlight. P.S. Grandpa, Dad suddenly has something come up and can't make it to my parent-teacher conference, but my teacher really wants to talk to my parents about my future development. Can you come? Grandpa personally came to the school. This was treatment even Ethan had never received. The homeroom teacher was trembling with respect, and the principal hurried over to receive him. Grandpa sat calmly in the principal's chair and asked, "How's my granddaughter's usual academic performance? Are there any areas needing improvement?" Asking rhetorical questions, the homeroom teacher quickly said a lot of complimentary words, emphasizing that I was nothing short of an outstanding student in every aspect. Only then did Grandpa nod in satisfaction. After the parent-teacher meeting, he hesitated for a moment before unexpectedly instructing the driver to drive to the mall. He said, I noticed all the young girls in your class dressed themselves up beautifully. Why are you the only one dressed so plainly? Are you being mistreated by your father? In the end, he ordered 6 or 7 outfits for me and bought several handbags as well. Staring at the numbers on the bill, I nervously said, Grandpa, aren't you afraid I'm after your money now? He burst into laughter. Go ahead and take it. What worries me is if you didn't want it. I froze for a moment, then joined in the laughter. Zoe thought that to win Grandpa over, one had to rely on cuteness, emotional value, or playing sweet and spoiled. But she didn't understand Grandpa was a self-made entrepreneur who'd seen countless sugary traps and the darkest sides of human nature. He neither needed nor seemed to value praise and coquetry from worthless individuals. A ruler in his twilight years most wishes to see vibrant younger generations. All I need to do is keep proving my capabilities, and I'll inevitably become the second Ethan Carter. Grandpa's precious darling. 7 years later, Grandpa renovated a study specifically for me and Ethan. I was playing chess with Ethan when the news came. Dad had stubbornly, against Grandpa's objections, invested tens of millions of dollars into a shell company. Now, that company has collapsed. In the study next door, Grandpa is absolutely furious. Even through the wall, I could hear him roaring. Is that a tumor growing on your neck? How many times did I tell you that company was unreliable? Why didn't you listen? Explain my foot. I no longer have a son like you. Get out. As far as I'm concerned, you're dead. My heart sank. Just like in my previous life, Grandpa was about to banish Dad from the family. I just didn't know if this time, Grandpa would vent his anger on me too. Would he kick me out of the house like he chased Zoe away? Bang! The study door was flung open. Grandpa stood at the threshold, face darkened with fury. Chloe Miller, come out. Ethan immediately rose to shield me with his body. Grandfather, no matter what Uncle has done, Chloe is innocent. Grandpa said coldly, this isn't any of your business. When Ethan tried to speak further, I tugged at his sleeve. It's all right, brother. Grandpa must need to talk with me about something. In the solemn, antiquated study, the aroma of single malt Scotch whiskey lingered in the air. I respectfully poured and distributed the wine, placing the cup before Grandfather. Then, just as I had on my first day here, I found a corner and sat down quietly. Grandfather studied me intently for a long moment, his aged eyes seeming capable of penetrating one's soul. I remained still, enduring his scrutiny. After what felt like an eternity, Grandfather spoke. I've decided to sever ties with your father. What do you think? I said. Dad ignored all warnings and made a grave mistake. He needs to realize his error. Grandfather asked, aren't you going to persuade me otherwise? I nearly sighed. Why should I persuade you? Last week when we discussed the rise and fall of that American family-owned corporation, I clearly stated that when family members lack sufficient competence, the company should be handed over to professional managers. You know better than I exactly how competent father is. If I tried convincing you to keep him on, my conscience wouldn't allow it. Grandpa narrowed his eyes and said, if I kick him out, you'll have to live a hard life. Are you still willing to do that? I smiled helplessly. The money was always yours to begin with. You can give it to whomever you wish. What say do I have in the matter? As for me, whether I tutor or take on an internship, I'll find a way to earn tuition. You don't need to worry about me. Being saddled with a father like this is simply my fate, and I don't resent it. After a long silence, the fire in the fireplace grew stronger. I reached out to add more firewood, but Grandpa personally poured me a cup of water instead. He gazed into my eyes and said, having such a father is your fate. But in your destiny, besides your father, there's also me. Grandpa chased Dad out of the house, yet moved my belongings into his own home. From then on, Lakeside Manor also had a bedroom that belonged to me. I no longer had to endure the various women Dad brought home, because I became Grandpa's granddaughter, the granddaughter under Grandpa's protection. 8. That day, after school, I encountered an unexpected visitor. Zoe Miller. She was dressed seductively and glamorously, head to toe in luxury brands. Her makeup was meticulously done, with long, fluttering false eyelashes that could stir up a breeze. Zoe looked me up and down dramatically, wrinkling her brow. I heard Dad went bankrupt, so I rushed over to check on you. No offense, sis, but even if we're broke now, you can't go around dressed in such rags. I instinctively glanced down at myself. My basketball shoes had unexpectedly split open during today's game. I just hadn't had time to change them yet. The clothes and pants were just ordinary sportswear, a bit worn, but I found them loose and comfortable, so I loved wearing them. As for accessories, I'm honestly not like some girls in class who love wearing bracelets and necklaces. Bracelets would slow down my writing speed, and necklaces hinder my exercise, so the pile of jewelry my grandpa bought me is still sitting untouched in the wardrobe. Seeing my silence, Zoe took it as tacit agreement. She leaned back, her laughter blooming with particular radiance. You're so pitiful, sis. Unlike me, I already have 2 Hermes bags, lots of pretty dresses, and I live like a princess every day. I didn't want to talk about this, so I asked her, I haven't seen you at school since last year. did you transfer? She replied, what's so great about school? I dance every day now, and mom even helps me with makeup and skincare. She says girls don't need to learn so much. Beauty is what really matters. As she spoke, she leaned in, pointing at her own eyes, and said smugly, see my double eyelids? Mom took me to get them done. They look much better than your single eyelids, don't they? Look at my hands again. I get full body treatments every week. Mom says this is what being soft and boneless means. Now look at yours. Ugh, how come they're so rough and calloused? I unfolded my hands and glanced at my palms. Some of these calluses came from gripping a pen too long. Others formed during my gym workouts. Soft hands cannot wield a fist. What I want are hands strong enough to command my own life. Seeing my silence, Zoe grew even more pleased with herself. Envious, aren't you? She said. But don't think about returning to mother's side. She likes obedient, well-behaved daughters. She has no use for you. I lowered my head and smiled. Yes, mother liked obedient, well-behaved daughters. In the past, because I refused to submit, she beat me until my body was covered in wounds. Zoe thought the cosmetics, miniskirts, and designer bags her mother bought her were out of maternal love. Little did they know that all of it were merely tickets to hell. Those beautiful dresses would be torn to shreds. Even the most beautiful makeup will be ravaged and worn, amidst ornate and exquisite beds. Those old men enjoy hearing little girls beg for mercy through tears. How could pie possibly fall from the sky? My dear sister, you simply don't realize. The price of getting something for nothing is far more costly than money. 9. After graduating high school, I received an acceptance letter from an Ivy League business school, becoming Ethan's fellow alum once again. Grandfather was delighted and threw me a graduation party. Ethan even took an international flight back specifically to celebrate with me. Amidst the clinking glasses, a middle-aged man in a suit began buttering me up. As expected of Mr. Miller's granddaughter, the apple truly doesn't fall far from the tree. This was actually incorrect. But in this setting, everyone tacitly overlooked the fact that my grandfather's actual worthless progeny, his true apple, was a foolish and incompetent waste of space. And now, he was struggling to make ends meet by driving for Uber to pay off his debts. I smiled and nodded, raising my glass to look at this gentleman. The moment I saw him, I felt my blood run cold. This man had a mole above his right eyebrow and a scar on his ear, and beneath his suit, there was an unsightly birthmark covering a large portion of his chest. How did I know so clearly? Because he had once been a frequent guest at my mother's, in the pink-tiled bathroom of a luxurious villa. Frank Sterling's greatest pleasure was gripping my hair and dunking my head into the bathtub over and over. He said my suffocation brought him the greatest joy. He said my mother took money and relies on him for business. Even if he killed me, my mother wouldn't care. So I'd better not resist. I'd better cooperate obediently. Otherwise, the whip in his hand would beat me until I'm bruised and bloody. It's this face I'll never forget. Seeing my strange expression, Ethan took the wine glass from my hand, smoothly covering for me without a trace. My sister can't hold her liquor. I'll drink this glass for her. Everyone laughed and clapped their hands, praising Mr. Miller for his good fortune and saying how admirable the deep brotherly love in the Miller family was, and so on. Grandpa noticed something was off with me and suggested I take a break in the lounge. In the lounge, I gulped down ice water, trying to calm myself. By my calculations, Mother should have revealed her true colors by now. What about Zoe then? What would happen to her? I took out my phone and called her. Little sister, have you been okay lately? On the video call, Zoe stared at me with disdain. What's this? Having a tough time with Dad and now you remember me? Weren't you acting all tough before? If you want to come crawling back now, you'd better get on your knees and beg. I shook my head. That's not it. I just wanted to know how you've been doing lately. Zoe sneered. My dear sister, what's with the fake concern? You'd love it if my life were miserable, wouldn't you? Too bad for you. I'm doing great. I've got a boyfriend now, powerful and wealthy, who spoils me like a princess. And what's more, I'm now one of the key employees at my mom's company, managing over a dozen staff members. My dear sister, I think you'd better worry about yourself for now. Otherwise, you might end up delivering takeout with Dad in the future. With that, Zoe hung up the phone. I stared at my phone, lost in thought. In my previous life, after Mom and Dad got divorced, she received a portion of the assets. But she had grown accustomed to a life of luxury and couldn't bear living frugally. Soon, she returned to her old ways, trying to seduce another wealthy man. But she had aged, and no matter how meticulously she maintained her appearance, she still couldn't compare to the youthful beauty of younger women. After several failed attempts, Mother realized that although men were no longer interested in her, but she seemed very interested in my daughter. And so, my nightmare began. Zoe truly seems very happy now. Or is this just the final illusion before a mental breakdown? 6 months later, I returned to China. Around this time, Grandfather's birthday was approaching. I dragged Ethan to pick out a gift for Grandpa, only to run into Zoe at the auction house. She was wearing a tight slip dress with bold, seductive makeup, completely out of place with the auction's atmosphere. But the moment she saw me, she perked up. "Chloe Miller, what are you doing here? Can you even afford a place like this?" As she spoke, she glanced over my shoulder. Behind me, Ethan stood dressed in a silver gray shirt and black suit. The man carried himself with effortless grace and refined elegance. Zoe stared at him as if she'd seen a ghost. "Is that Ethan Carter?" Ethan gave a slight nod. "That's me. And you are?" He didn't recognize Zoe anymore. Zoe and I used to look quite similar, but now she's had double eyelid surgery, facial bone reduction, and breast augmentation. With heavy makeup and a sexy outfit, she had become completely unrecognizable from her previous self. It was totally understandable that Ethan didn't recognize her, but when Zoe heard his question, she flew into a rage. "Oh great, you remember her but don't recognize me, is that it? How could you two possibly be together? Dad went bankrupt ages ago, how did you manage to latch onto Ethan Carter?" As she spoke, it was as if a sudden realization had struck her. "You're trying to seduce Ethan, aren't you? Thinking you can escape your miserable life by luring him in, is that it? Utterly shameless. And to think you're cousins." At this point, even without my explanation, Ethan understood exactly who she was. His face darkened as he snapped, "That's complete nonsense." Zoe's eyes burned red, her expression twisted into a deranged frenzy. "You're defending her? Do you know her family is bankrupt now? Her dad drives for Uber these days, getting cursed at every day, and she gets beaten and insulted constantly. You're standing up for such trash?" Ethan furrowed his brows and shielded me behind him. He spoke deliberately. "I think you've made a mistake. Uncle was kicked out of the family, but Chloe wasn't. Chloe is currently studying at the Wharton School, and grandfather thinks highly of her." 11. The moment the words left his mouth, Zoe felt as though struck by lightning. "What are you saying? That's impossible. Chloe was supposed to be driving for Uber with Dad. There's no way she's in college." I couldn't be bothered with her and tried to pull Ethan away, but Zoe blocked my path. "How could Grandpa possibly value you? Even I can't catch his eye. What makes you worthy?" She looked me up and down as if she'd found the answer. "Grandpa's a pervert too, isn't he? Turns out the old bastard has this taste. Should have just contacted me earlier. I've got plenty of young girls working for me." Smack. I slapped Zoe hard across the face. "Talk about me all you want, but not Grandpa." "This slap is from Grandpa." Zoe rushed forward to hit me, but she was stopped by a middle-aged man. The man had a mole above his right eyebrow and a scar on his ear. It was none other than Frank Sterling, the very guest my mother had schemed relentlessly to please in my past life. He firmly restrained Zoe in his arms, then turned to Ethan and me with repeated apologies. "I'm sorry, she has some mental issues. I didn't keep a close eye on her. My sincerest apologies, we didn't mean to offend Mr. Miller." So, the so-called wealthy and powerful boyfriend Zoe kept mentioning was actually Frank Sterling. How pathetic. She willingly clings to the powerful, assuming all girls in the world must trade their bodies to gain something. I shook my head and said, "Keep your people under control, Mr. Frank." Frank nodded repeatedly, but Zoe kept struggling in his arms. "That's my grandfather too. Get this straight, he was my grandfather." Frank slapped her again and shouted, still not shutting up, "The Miller family only has 2 children. Don't you dare claim kinship, you little tramp." With that, he gave me and Ethan an apologetic glance before dragging Zoe away. At that day's auction, I successfully bid on the landscape painting by my grandfather's favorite artist. But I wasn't in a good mood, don't get me wrong. Zoe brought this upon herself, and I don't feel sorry for her. I just couldn't help thinking about all the other young girls in Mom's villa. And more guests like Frank Sterling. Perhaps now is the time for me to do something. 12. On the day of Grandpa's birthday banquet, the house was filled with distinguished guests. Ethan and I presented that landscape painting, and Grandpa was beaming with joy. He took us by the hand and introduced us one by one to all his closest friends. "This is my granddaughter Chloe, my little lucky star. She has such a sharp eye for investments. She bought this painting with the money she earned from investing. Chloe, this is Uncle Sanders, the chairman of the XX Group. This is Aunt Gina, she's the founder of the XX Charity Foundation." Title after title and name after name slid by my ears. Only one struck my eardrums like a hammer blow. Howard Grant. I remembered this name. In my past life, it had appeared countless times in Frank Sterling's furious tirades. Howard Grant was a military man turned industrialist, a man of absolute integrity who wouldn't tolerate even a speck of dust in his eye. Originally, he was Frank Sterling's boss, but when Frank was caught taking bribes, Howard fired him. After leaving the company, Frank started his own business and poached many client resources from his former employer. As a result, the two became bitter enemies. Now, they both seem determined to win a particular government bidding project, and it's the critical phase of project preparation. Thinking of this, I raised my glass and offered a toast to Howard Grant. So you're the chairman of Grant Industries. I just heard about your company recently. Howard smiled. Oh, from whom? I grinned and said word by word. I met Mr. Frank Sterling at an auction the other day. Hearing Frank Sterling's name, the corners of Howard's mouth twitched downward. Pretending not to notice, I continued, speaking of which, it's quite a coincidence. This is already the third time I've run into Mr. Frank this month. The first 2 times, he seemed to be drinking with Penelope Vance. Penelope Vance is my mother. After divorcing my father, she not only got plastic surgery but also had her name legally changed. No one in this city knows her background anymore. She's become a completely new person. Over the past few years, she started with online live streaming, her business growing bigger and bigger, until she became the hottest female entrepreneur of the moment. Outsiders see her as the epitome of a rags-to-riches inspirational story. But industry insiders know her so-called enterprise is nothing more than a den of power and sex transactions. The moment he heard the names Penelope Vance and Frank Sterling mentioned together, Howard understood almost immediately. You said, Penelope Vance? I replied innocently, yes, that auntie is very beautiful, and the young girls around her are all quite pretty too, though that uncle sitting with them looked somewhat familiar. Probably someone I've seen on TV. Howard's eyes lit up. He hastily filled his glass to the brim, reached over to clink mine, then threw back his head and drank it all in one go. Chloe, your grandfather was right. You truly are a lucky charm. 13. I didn't know what it meant to kill with a borrowed knife, nor did I understand how to strike an ox through a mountain. It was just one afternoon, as I idly scrolled through news on my phone, that I discovered my mother's company had gone bankrupt, and she herself had been detained. Along with the few public relations managers who were regulars at the villa, they were all taken to the detention center. Law enforcement officials revealed some information to reporters, stating that they had received reports related to power for money and power for sex transactions, which they took very seriously. They launched a special investigation and obtained substantial evidence. In some time, once the court issues its verdict, the relevant criminals will be sent to prison. In the news coverage, the eyes of the men and women at the arrest scene were blurred with mosaics. Yet I could still recognize the man with the ugly birthmark. It was Frank Sterling. The panicked, sexy woman fleeing from his embrace was none other than Zoe Miller. Unlike these exposés revealing society's dark underbelly, turning the page to the business section, the headline announced Grant Industries' rising stock prices after securing a major tender project, boosting shareholder confidence. Folding the newspaper aside, the housemaid presented him with a gift. It was a gift from Mr. Howard Grant for my 21st birthday, a dazzling diamond bracelet. He said nothing, left no note. Yet I knew exactly why such an extravagant gift had come. I closed the box and shoved it deep inside the wardrobe. Like many of my dazzling pieces of jewelry, it was beautiful, but no longer what I pursued. Every kind of beauty comes at a price. Before I exchanged my labor, my talent, and my efforts for it, I wasn't yet worthy to wear them. 14 half a year later, the verdict was announced in that shocking nationwide case. The masterminds behind the illegal confinement of underage girls for forced prostitution, Penelope Vance and Zoe Miller, received extremely severe sentences. One afternoon, I received a call from the prison. They said my sister wanted to see me. Outside the prison, I ran into Dad. I thought he was here to visit my sister. Turns out, he was just driving for Uber nearby. When he saw me, he shuffled over with a shameless smile. Chloe, could you put in a good word for me with Grandpa? Blood's thicker than water. You wouldn't want to see your old man suffer, would you? Ethan tried to push him away, but I stopped him. I looked calmly at this aged and exhausted man and said, you deserve it. Once, Grandfather had placed high hopes on him and personally mentored him. Yet he squandered the family fortune on drink, gambling, and affairs. I still remember one day when I returned home from school as a child. The door to his bedroom was left open, revealing naked men and women inside. Whether high on drugs or drunk, a naked man tried to reach out and pull me inside. And my father just stood there watching, laughing hysterically without making any move to stop him. I was only 7 years old that year. Had it not been for the nanny saving me, I can't imagine what might have happened. Now, looking at my wretched-looking father, I could no longer find even a trace of his former dashing charisma. Perhaps this is fate's sense of fairness. If you consider yourself heaven's favorite, destiny will inevitably push you to the position you truly deserve. Father shouted something behind me, but I paid no further attention. I just strode forward, leaving the nightmares of childhood behind. 15. Prison visitation room. Behind the glass, Zoe wore an orange prison jumpsuit and shackles. But the moment she saw me, she became extremely excited, desperately trying to lunge forward and nearly took a bad tumble. I looked down at her and said, calm down, little sister. Zoe asked, I heard you've already graduated from business school? I nodded. She added, and I heard you've joined Grandpa's group as the general manager? I corrected her, just an intern. Whether I can stay depends on performance. She continued, I heard Grandpa felt bad about your long commute, so he bought you an apartment downtown. I said, I'm paying Grandpa rent, but she seemed not to hear, lost in her own world. Why? This should have been my life. If I'd chosen Dad, all of this should have been mine, the elite schools, the luxury mansion, the inheritance of the corporation, it should all have been mine. Chloe Miller, you've ruined everything for me. I looked at her with pity. Didn't you choose your father? Zoe snapped out of her frenzy and after a long pause, pointed at me with trembling fingers. You've been reborn too? I didn't answer directly, only saying, both times, I wanted to save you. In my past life, my father went bankrupt, and Zoe came to me, wanting me to take her to our mother's luxury villa. I refused because I didn't want her to suffer the same torment as me. Yet she grew to hate me, drugged me, and took my life. In this life, when I met Frank Sterling and realized our mother might still be up to the same schemes, I gave Zoe a call. Yet she didn't feel any shame about it. On the contrary, she took pride in it and even joined forces with her mother to oppress other girls. News reports exposed Penelope as wicked, selling out women for personal gain. But Zoe was even worse, playing the accomplice to tyranny. The methods of torture she devised were more vicious than Penelope's. Gazing at the sobbing figure behind the glass, I felt not an ounce of pity in my heart. Zoe Miller, no matter what you choose, your ending won't be good, because your starting point has always been wrong. You treat people as tools for gaining wealth and status, spending your whole life chasing the illusion of effortless success. Even when subjected to humiliation by one older man after another, you still consider that more honorable than honest work. Grandfather never misjudged you. Like your father, you indulge your desires, and like your mother, you'll stop at nothing to get what you want, selfish and cruel to the core. Zoe was laughing and crying, on the verge of a breakdown. No, it's impossible. I need to try again. Her face twisted with fury as she lunged at me, but she forgot. There was a thick pane of glass between us. She slammed hard against the glass. Then the guards dragged her away. Her shrill curses echoed down the hallway. Chloe Miller, I hope you die miserably. I just smiled. Die a dog's death, you say? I wonder who's the one that'll truly meet a wretched end. 16. When the news of Penelope's death reached me, I had already completed rotations through every department of the corporation. I heard Penelope happened to share a prison cell with the mother of a murdered girl. She was a fraud who deceived everyone, just to earn money for her daughter's medical treatment. But after she was imprisoned, her daughter was seduced, deceived, imprisoned, and tortured by Penelope. In the dead of night, that mother ended Penelope's life in a way no one could have imagined. They say Penelope died a horrible death. On the phone, the attendant asked me if I wanted to claim her ashes. I said, no need. Throw it away, or lose it. It doesn't matter. Really. The call ended. I just kept writing my proposal, blinking with a smile when a colleague asked what I wanted to drink later. I'll have a mango pitaya special. During my rotation days at the conglomerate, I sometimes complained to Grandpa about working overtime. It was so intense it nearly drained half the life out of young people. So Grandpa took it very seriously, demanding we benchmark Silicon Valley companies, prioritize efficiency, and eliminate pointless overtime. Several HR managers and department heads who had introduced the overtime culture to the group were also dismissed. By this time, Ethan had become the pillar of the group's business division. He had always been intelligent, and growing up under his grandfather's influence, he had a keen understanding of the nuances of the market. However, sometimes he faced issues of being too far removed from the front lines and inefficient information flow, so he would turn to me for help. I don't have any great skills, just that when I first joined the company, I hid my true identity. That's how I could mingle on the front lines of the corporation, overhearing all kinds of gossip and rumors, then quietly passing along to Ethan the type of people employees despise but bosses adore. And then Ethan would descend like divine justice, becoming the great savior. Oh, the great savior, in the eyes of the company's staff. After voluntarily working overtime on Friday, and I truly mean voluntarily, Ethan picked me up to go to Grandpa's house for dinner. The car ride was filled with melodious and cheerful music. Outside the window, a full moon hung high over the river. Out of nowhere, Ethan said, "When I was little, I thought there wasn't much difference between you and your mom." I laughed and cursed. "Are you nuts? That's such an insult." Ethan chuckled too, his smile gentle at the corners of his lips. "Yeah." Later I realized it didn't seem quite right. "You actually take after Grandma more in personality." Grandma, the one who started from scratch with Grandpa and held up half the sky as the co-founder of their corporation. I sheepishly accepted the compliment and added, "Actually, I've been wanting to say thank you for a long time. I often boast that it's all because of my hard work, my diligence, and my intelligence that Grandpa took notice of me and lifted me up. But that isn't entirely accurate. On this path where I've been sprinting forward, desperate to leave the nightmares of my past life behind, it was Ethan who first extended a helping hand to me. He suggested to Grandpa that I should attend the lecture with him, and so, in Grandpa's antiquated study, a place was made for me. After listening to my sincere thanks, Ethan smiled. Just as the traffic light turned red, he tapped my forehead with a flick of his finger. "Miss, we're family. No need for thanks. Besides, you might have forgotten, when we were kids, Zoe pushed me into the lake, and it was you who jumped in to save me." I froze. There was such an incident? Ethan glanced at me and earnestly added, "Though back then, you weren't even as tall as my waist, didn't actually manage to save me, and even held me back. Your heart was in the right place." I burst into laughter as the night breeze gently carried the melody beneath the bright moon. Schubert's piano piece flowed mellifluously and tenderly through my fingertips. I heard Ethan's leisurely voice. "So, Chloe, everything in this world simply comes down to virtue being its own reward. Rather than thanking me, you should thank yourself. Precisely because you're a good person, even if you hadn't met me, Ethan Carter, you would have encountered John Carter or Mike Carter." I lowered my head and smiled faintly. For some inexplicable reason, tears welled up in the corners of my eyes. Once, I lived in a home filled with schemes and estrangement. Mom only wanted money. Dad only loved women. My sister was a little liar who knew how to play cute and constantly set traps for me. Later, I was taken away by my mother, and I thought it would be the start of a whole new life. She used an extremely cruel method that nearly destroyed my life. During those years of captivity, different men would barge into my room every day. I was even afraid to fall asleep, terrified that each time I opened my eyes, there'd be another faceless stranger. What I could never understand was that the person who wrapped me up as a gift and gave me away was my own mother, the one who should have loved me the most. "Mom, why did you do this?" "Mom, I'm your daughter." Countless whys intertwine, becoming the knife I drag across my wrists, the sleeping pills I swallow, the despair of being unable to die no matter how I try. But thankfully, everything has changed. I now have a grandfather who's stern yet kind-hearted, an outstanding and upright elder brother. They care for me, push me forward, and support my growth with freedom. They asked the younger sister first, asking who she wanted to go with. Those dark, agonizing moments, the gasps that made one's scalp crawl. It's all far away from me now. I reached up to wipe away my tears and turned to look out the car window at that big, bright moon. Ethan clearly noticed but was considerate enough not to pry tactlessly. Instead, he casually diverted the topic. "Grandpa secretly asked me what birthday present would suit you best." I thought for a moment and said, "Don't buy anything. I'd like to eat his scrambled eggs." Ethan exaggeratedly laughed. "What? You're that easy to please, Miss Princess?" I chuckled. "Isn't Grandpa's homemade cooking enough? Some are willing to amuse me, some are willing to cook for me, and I can stand in the sunlight, living cleanly and without fear. This is the best gift life has ever given me." The end.